Imagine standing at a bus stop in the pouring rain, waiting for a service that's late, overcrowded, or worse, canceled. This isn't a one-off experience. This is the daily reality for thousands of commuters in Brisbane. They rely on a public transport system that feels like it's been left in the dust while the rest of Australia moves forward. Today, we're diving into why Brisbane's public transport might just be the worst in the country. Every city has its transport issues, but in Brisbane, it seems to be a combination of poor planning, lack of funding, and outdated infrastructure. For a city that's rapidly growing, you'd expect its transport system to keep up. Instead, what we have is a patchwork of services that seem to be perpetually underperforming. Buses, trains, and ferries are all part of the system, but ask anyone who relies on them, and you'll hear stories of frustration, delay, and disconnection. Buses are the backbone of Brisbane's public transport, yet they're plagued with issues. Long wait times, frequent breakdowns, and routes that don't cater to the city's growing suburbs leave commuters stranded. Many residents complain that buses are unreliable, often running late or skipping stops entirely. Imagine planning your day around a bus schedule, only to have your plans derailed by a no-show. It's not just inconvenient, it's infuriating. Then there's the train network, which should provide a faster and more efficient option for commuters. Instead, it's a system that feels like it belongs in the past. Limited routes, infrequent services, and overcrowded trains during peak hours make it a nightmare for those who need to get to work or school on time. The lack of investment in rail infrastructure is glaringly obvious. Brisbane's train network hasn't expanded at the pace required to match the city's growth, leaving entire suburbs without access to reliable rail services. Ferries, once considered a charming and scenic way to travel, are now seen as a luxury rather than a necessity. The services are limited, expensive, and often cater more to tourists than to daily commuters. For a city built along a river, you'd think the ferry system would be a shining example of innovation and accessibility. Instead, it's underutilized and impractical for the average resident. One of the biggest issues facing Brisbane's public transport system is its lack of integration. In cities like Sydney and Melbourne, there's a sense of cohesion between buses, trains, and trams, allowing commuters to switch between modes of transport seamlessly. Brisbane, on the other hand, feels like a disjointed mess. Timetables don't align, connections are missed, and commuters are left frustrated at the inefficiency of it all. Affordability is another major concern. Public transport in Brisbane is notoriously expensive, especially when compared to other major Australian cities. For a family or someone on a tight budget, the cost of commuting can be a significant burden. When the system doesn't deliver value for money, it's no wonder people opt to drive instead. The roads become more congested, pollution levels rise, and the cycle of inefficiency continues. And let's not forget accessibility. Brisbane's public transport system does little to accommodate people with disabilities or those who require additional support. Broken lifts, inaccessible platforms, and a lack of clear information make it incredibly challenging for some residents to use public transport at all. In a modern, developed city, this lack of inclusivity is unacceptable. The irony of Brisbane's transport woes is that the city has the potential to do so much better. With its growing population and increasing urbanization, there's a clear need for a robust, efficient, and affordable public transport system. Yet, despite numerous promises from governments and transport authorities, real progress seems slow and sporadic. Projects are announced with fanfare, only to be delayed or scaled back, leaving residents wondering if they'll ever see meaningful change. Commuters have resorted to venting their frustrations on social media, sharing photos of packed buses, broken ticket machines, and endless lines at train stations. These images paint a damning picture of a system that's failing its people. They're not just inconveniences, they're daily struggles that affect work, family life, and mental well-being. Some blame the government, others blame the transport authorities, and some say it's the result of a car-centric culture that prioritizes roads over rails. Whatever the reason, the outcome is the same: a public transport system that doesn't meet the needs of its users. The ripple effects of Brisbane's failing public transport are far-reaching. Traffic congestion is at an all-time high, with more cars on the road as people abandon unreliable buses and trains. Air quality suffers as emissions increase, and the city's livability takes a hit. Brisbane has long been touted as a great place to live, but how great can it be when getting from point A to point B is such a hassle? Brisbane isn't the only city with transport issues, but it's hard to ignore how far behind it seems compared to other major Australian cities. Sydney and Melbourne, for all their faults, have made significant strides in improving their public transport systems. Brisbane, meanwhile, feels like it's stuck in limbo, waiting for a miracle that never comes. The question is, what can be done to fix it? Experts suggest a combination of investment, innovation, and better planning. Expanding the train network to reach underserved areas, increasing bus frequency, and integrating services are all steps in the right direction. But these changes require political will, community support, and most importantly, funding. The people of Brisbane deserve better. They deserve a public transport system that's reliable, affordable, and accessible. They deserve a city that prioritizes sustainability and livability. It's not just about getting from one place to another, it's about building a better future for everyone. As you watch this, you might be one of those frustrated commuters, or maybe you're someone who's avoided public transport altogether because of its reputation. Either way, the issue affects all of us. Whether it's through increased traffic, environmental impact, or the city's overall development, the state of Brisbane's public transport has far-reaching consequences. So, where do we go from here? Can Brisbane turn things around and build a public transport system that rivals the best in the country? Or will it continue to lag behind, leaving its residents to bear the brunt of its inefficiencies? The answers aren't easy, but one thing is clear: something has to change. The status quo isn't good enough, and the people of Brisbane deserve better. If you've made it this far, you're probably as passionate about this issue as I am. Let's start a conversation. Share your experiences in the comments below, and let's keep the pressure on those who have the power to make a difference. Brisbane deserves a public transport system that works for everyone. It's time to stop making excuses and start making progress. The future of our city depends on it. Brisbane's transportation system has its strengths, but it poses challenges for public commuters, international students, and low-income individuals. While the city boasts an extensive network of buses, trains, and ferries, high ticket prices and limited services in outer suburbs can make daily commuting difficult. For international students, navigating the system can be daunting due to a lack of clear information and affordable options. Low-income residents often face barriers like long travel times and insufficient coverage in less privileged areas, making access to work, education, and services harder. Addressing these issues could create a more inclusive and efficient transport system for everyone.